Welcome to the Spawn Chunks. This is episode number 352 for Monday, June 2nd. It's June already. Holy smokes. And this, of course, is 2025. This is a podcast all about Minecraft, and you can find it on your favorite podcasting platform. It's also on YouTube with a video version. Video version is also on Spotify. If you're enjoying the show, please consider subscribing wherever you're listening or watching. My name is Joel Duggan, and joining me, as always, is an improvisational Pixel Riffs. Hello, sir.
Hello! Nothing up my sleeves. Wait, that's magic, not improv. I'm still learning, it turns out. And we've been talking a little bit about that. I've been visited over the weekend by a couple of friends, and they've been part of improv shows in Brighton that we've gone out to see. Joel has finished the demo playtest of Modulus, and we've just been chatting about what we've been up to with both of those things over the weekend in the Render Distance. That's the extended version of our show that patrons get to listen to if you support the show at patreon.com/thespawnchunks. So if you want a little bit of extra podcast every week, consider checking that out. We also had our monthly Minecraft hangout for May this past weekend, where our patrons got to tell us what they'd been up to in Minecraft this month, and some of that is even going to inspire some of the main discussion that we have coming up later this week as we look ahead to the launch of the Happy Ghast in Minecraft 1.21.6. Some news coming up about that as well. Plenty of stuff to talk about on today's show.
So inquiring minds want to know, have you found the skeletal dog?
I have not. Tragically, I have not. I have now actually surpassed the amount of attempts it took Shovel to get hold of her skeletal wolf mount on the Misadventures SMP, so the search continues. I have said that attempts will continue until morale improves, and the only thing that will actually improve morale is me actually getting hold of a skeletal wolf. So it's going to take a little longer. I am starting to feel the pinch at this point of not having made anything build-wise on the server, and so maybe I'm going to start filtering in attempts for this with the land that I would need to purchase and all of the stuff I want to build now, because, yeah, it's getting a little bit repetitive. I'm just worried about the audience more than my own. Like, I could do this all day, but I feel like I want to provide a little bit more content both to the audience and also to this discussion segment of the show, because the only other thing I've been doing is craft mine. I'm heading for endgame now in the hopes that I can wrap up this kind of side quest that I've been doing with the craft mine update and get back into the Minecraft survival guide for when the Happy Ghast actually arrives. Because I've got plans for what I want to do with that, and I'm thinking we probably need to get done with craft mine before any of that stuff really kicks into high gear and takes my focus away from the craft mine mini-series, which threatens to become a much longer series if I stick with it. But yeah, I think I've maybe got one episode left, and that'll probably wrap it up.
That's frustrating when you're doing the RNG grind. I remember that from World of Warcraft or from other games, and you're trying to get, the right thing to show up at the right time. And I mean, I guess at this point you're winning on the server in terms of most attempts. Yeah,
at least there's some positive spin to be had out of it, and it has also still been getting me plenty of currency that I can use on the server. So
you mentioned
before,
that, yeah.
I was looking for a goal of like 85,000 coins that I could buy this large area of land with, but I figured if I have a little extra than that, then it gives me the opportunity to, say, build a bridge from that land to adjacent land masses. There's a large river that's very close by, so if I want to help make the server a bit better connected so that people don't have to use a boat to come up river to find me, then there's always the option of doing stuff like that, or maybe getting a couple of extra little corners of the area that have interesting landmarks or just fill in gaps here and there, but aren't in this big square that I drew to outline the area that I wanted. So it's nice to have a little bit of extra stuff on the side, and I've also still been gathering enchanted books from the loot chests that are in the crypt, so I've got more than enough mending books that I can trade them to other people on the server. Lots of commercial opportunities become available if we've just been grinding this hard for resources. So hopefully some building can start soon, regardless of whether I get the wolf or not, and I'll have more to say on next week's show.
Nice. I have been doing a lot, actually, in Minecraft. I have been focusing on the to-do list that's left for West Hill, and we're down to like 2 pages, I think, in the book. And even then, I checked off some of those things on those 2 pages this week. The first thing I did was finish all of the upper-level interior decorations in the keep. So outside of the basement, which is the last thing I'm going to do, because that's currently my storage room. That's where all my shulkers are and where all my bulk storage is for blocks and stuff from clearing the landscape. But I finished the interior design of the upper levels with the barracks above the library, as well as the main hall mezzanine. There's like a hallway that kind of arches over the throne room area and then goes to another tower. And then there's also the magistrate's bedroom. And the bedroom was probably the one that took me the longest, because there was a lot of like little finicky things. Like I had the forethought to give it a very thick floor, so to make it look fancy, I could change the floor from stone to a combination of stripped dark oak, but then I could also put like wool and concrete powder to make it look like a really large carpet that wouldn't then infringe on me putting stuff on top of it. So I've got a big carpet underneath the bed. It's a big double bed. There's trapdoors making it look like a more of a grand bed, like for like a footboard and a headboard, using a lot of spruce trapdoors and dark oak trapdoors just because they look fancy. Having like a drop ceiling with a lantern and flower pots. And I'd used a couple of the data packs. I've got, I guess technically it's a mod, so it's the Armor Poser mod. So I was able to put banners in the Armor Poser mod, and when you switch them to the head slot, they appear just like they do in the world. But then, of course, you can put them anywhere, and they don't sway in the wind. And so using the kind of like, we'll call it the West Hill flag as kind of like a banner pattern on a couple of banners, I was able to use that to look like a fabric headboard. So it looks like it's a little bit more of a fancy headboard. And then I also have the mini block set pack. And I find that the enchanting table looks like a little jewelry box when you use it as a mini block. So I just kind of threw that in there as well. And it all came together pretty nicely. You know, it was a nice way to wrap up the top of the build. I just used white beds just because it looked good. I have snow layers at the base of the beds to kind of make it look like a thicker blanket at the base. So again, it looks like a 2x3 bed instead of a 1x2 bed. So that was really fun to put together. I also did the North Fort, which is the arrival area when you come into the build zone. I think most people probably know this, but we've got several build zones on the Citadel. And that is where you use a command block from like a central hub, and it takes you to a modern city build zone, the medieval fantasy build zone, which is where I am now. Then there's also, I think, the sci-fi zone and a area designated for like a Ming Dynasty, like Asian type inspired area, but no one's built there yet. But we found a place for it. It's a big jungle. And so this place, the fort, is where you arrive when you teleport yourself to the medieval build zone. And it had some lighting issues, so I have been met with creepers and zombies coming out of the fort. And as I did that, I also realized that I built this and decorated it before moss was even in the game. So I went back and added a path and did some texturing work and brought in some of the new bushes that we got in 1.21.5 and kind of like sprinkled around some decoration, and it came together really nicely. And I really like the way that it looks now. It feels very much like a completed, you know, connected build to Westill and the surrounding area. And there aren't many roads. The only roads that I've done are, of course, the road south to West Hill, but the other roads are like kind of hinted at, like this could go north and this could go west, and there's nothing east because there's a giant, you know, swamp that way. So I'll let other players decide whether they want to build roads to their respective kingdoms if they decide to build in the area. And then that actually was where I leaned into the rest of the week, which is texturing the East Road outside of West Hill. So outside of West Hill, there's a main crossroads just outside the North Gate with roads going in the 4 cardinal directions. The South Road is done because that's the one that goes through West Hill, so that's already been completed. But the North, West are left. The East is now completely textured. So it had been laid out, but it was just plain stone brick. There was no cracked stone. There was no andesite or cobble or anything like that. So I went through the whole thing, added the texture, tried to be as purposeful as I could with it, thinking about like the directions that people would travel, where wagon wheels might be. I had a few other things to build off of as well. So there were some dirt paths that were connecting to the road. There's a bridge in the middle of the road. So you can kind of use those points to be like, okay, well, this is where I should pay some attention to this. Like I should probably add some leaf litter, and I should add some more cracked stones and some more wear and tear as people use this path connecting to the main road. And what's nice about that is that when you focus on those highlights, you can then fill in the blanks between the 2 highlights that you might select, and it becomes a lot easier to kind of like do that road texture that feels random, feels like you're creating a pattern. But if you've got 2 key points that you can work in between, I find it a lot easier. So it came together pretty well, actually. It was a one single stream to get the East Road done, and I even had time at the end to add like kind of like subtle compass rose in the crossroads. I'm not sure if I'm going to keep it, but I think it's better than just being a great big empty space. So things are coming together. The road textures are one of the last things I wanted to do, just in case one of these roads had to move a little bit for a build, right? Like if you think, oh, this road is great, I want to texture it, but like, I haven't finished all the builds along this road yet. I should wait until all the builds are done and texture the road last, because there's nothing that would be more heartbreaking than spending 3 hours texturing a road, realizing that you have to move it a block or two to the left.
Yeah.
I think that would be a real pain. So we're getting there. Things are coming together on the West Hill build.
Nice. Yeah, I think it. I totally agree. It makes sense to get the roads done last, so you're not like building something over the top of it, and then all of that work is kind of going to waste. But like,
100%.
It definitely hasn't gone to waste. Looking at these screenshots, it's all looking fabulous. I think.
Thanks, man.
The tower looks like a really fun build that's sort of in the style of everything, but still feels kind of detached. You can see that being like a watch outpost kind of thing, just like looking for anybody who's approaching. And obviously, if that's where people arrive in the area, then it's kind of fun that they are. Are they somebody who's just arrived? Are they a guest in the area and they've just been like checked in by the town guard, or are they the town guard themselves? Have they been sort of conscripted suddenly as they arrive in the area? And there's I think the neat thing about this, the fact that you've done something similar, I think you did this in like a churchyard or maybe the keep kind of grounds in West Hill itself, is you've got roads in the front half and then like a dirt path around the back. So there's still sort of like a backyard to the area.
Yeah.
And you can make the whole thing kind of circular and enclosed within walls and still have maybe like a little garden area to it, so that even though there's clearly high traffic through one area and they've paved the road, the rest of it still feels well trodden and lived in. I think that's a really neat touch and a very straightforward detail to do. It doesn't seem like it would have taken all that long, give or take a bit of like the detail pass on it, to get like a straightforward path laid out like that and have some little bit of interest around the back where people aren't likely to go as much, but they still could, and you want there to be something there for them to see if you've done it, right?
Thanks. Yeah, that's exactly what happened. When I got to that area, basically there was a bunch of torch spam around and keeping everything lit up, but it was so old. I was like, why do I have torches everywhere? And it's like, oh, because this was built before the lighting changes, where mobs would spawn at light level 7 instead of 0. And that's why there was torches everywhere. So it turns out I could actually remove all of the torches and I didn't need them. And so the path was there for a couple of reasons. There was a big empty green space that used to be there that was just needing some decoration. But then I also wanted places to put little lanterns on the top of stone walls, not for mob proofing, but for just pure visuals, because it was just so dark. Like you'd look behind the fort and it would just be like, if it was nighttime, you could barely see the wall. I was like, okay, this needs a little bit of love. So that was the main decision there. And thanks. Yeah, that was one of the first things I built in the area. Like I built that before I even built West Hill, thinking like, I just want people that arrive there to not arrive teleported into like the middle of a field and immediately have a bad experience. And like, it could be a creeper, it could be a zombie, baby zombie, like anything, And so this was the way to tackle that. And I'm looking forward to taking kind of like all the landscaping things that I've learned, as well as the landscaping blocks that have come into the game in the last few years, and finishing off that north road. Like the north road is one of the things that's not quite done. There's a hill that isn't done. That's going to be like a dirt path, like a hiking trail sort of deal. And then there's also the transition from the stone road into like a dirt path when you get up by the farms that I've shown off on the show before. So there's a cool transition there, and that again, I didn't have mud blocks, I didn't have rooted dirt, I didn't have any of that kind of stuff. So I'm going to have those blocks available when I finish off that texture. So I'm looking forward to making it feel like, I guess, not to sound like I'm tooting my own horn, but bring the texture work in the area up to where I think I am now, 3 years later, compared to when I first built the North Road. Because of course the North Road is the first thing that I built. It's what leads you to West Hill. So it was one of the first roads that were laid down in the area. So it's nice to kind of go and revisit that and bring it up to the level of polish that I want it to be.
Yeah, and the interiors are looking great too. There's a lot of polish in there.
Oh,
I think it's again testament to how long you've been doing kind of projects like this now, and like the tricks that you've learned along the way that you can make it's like a 5x7 space, judging by the screenshots, into something that looks like a decent bedroom. And there's obviously like a little bit of armor stand magic, a little bit of like micro block, and of course the tables and chairs mod or data pack that you've mentioned. I really like the chair texture being like the seat pad for it is like the top texture of a shulker box, so it feels kind of like already in line with existing Minecraft textures, reusing those in neat ways. But I think the great thing about this is the subtlety of blue, that sort of light blue being the accent color. You talked last time about light blue and cyan being there in like the main hall of the keep with the fireplace and everything. And here you've got it, but you've got it in subtle ways. It's not like a children's bedroom where everything has to be pink, right? Like it's that kind of thing where it's like we've got a theme going on here. It's a color scheme, but it's not like, everybody's just bought me all the blue stuff because they heard I like blue. You know what I mean? Like the bed sheets don't have to be blue. You don't have like, warped wood and stuff everywhere. It's just like a subtle carpet. It's a little bit of the diamond accent on the enchanting table micro block. It's the soul lantern hanging from the ceiling, which is also a dim light source, so works better for a bedroom than the highly lit stuff that you're going to find elsewhere in the keep. And so I think it all comes together really nicely in that sort of design aesthetic, being like, we're going to put blue in here as an accent, but we're not going to go completely overboard with it.
Yeah. I can't take full credit for the soul lantern. A full-strength lantern melted the snow layers that were the blankets at the bottom of the bed.
Of course,
so
yeah.
I had to backtrack. I had them in there and really liked them before I hung the lantern, and then I moved the lantern by like one block just to kind of make the ceiling make sense. And then, of course, one of, but not both of the snow layers melted. I was like, oh crap. Okay, well, soul lantern should work okay.
One of those like Bob Ross happy little accident kind of things, right? Yeah, that's what it is. It's the universe telling you need a little extra accent of blue here, so Pix can comment on it in the next episode of the podcast.
Yeah, 100%. Well, moving into the news, we do have a lot to cover this week. The next Minecraft game drop has a name. On Sunday, June 1st, Minecraft announced that the upcoming drop will be titled Chase the Skies. The article goes on to highlight the features of the drop, which include the Happy Ghast, along with the dried Ghast and Ghastling, the locator bar, new leashing mechanics, craftable saddles, and new music composed by Amos Roddy. Vibrant visuals will also be coming to Bedrock in this drop, but Java players will have to wait a little bit longer to get their hands on the new visual direction for Minecraft. We also had a pre-release 1 for 1.21.6, now called Chasing the Skies, was published on May 28th, 2025. Quote, "From now on, you will most likely see us fixing bugs, and the release schedule might include more than one pre-release per week. We are on the finish line for the second drop of the year." Changes in 1.21.6 pre-release 1. The dried Ghast block now emits a vibration frequency of 11 when its block state changes. Shearing saddles, horse armor, and carpets now emits a vibration frequency of 6, along with the unequip frequency of 4. The ambient dried Ghast sounds are now adjusted under the blocks sound option instead of the ambient/environment option. A player riding a Happy Ghast can no longer completely fly through a Happy Ghast ridden by another player. Technical changes. The data pack version is now 79, bringing additional changes to custom dialogues. Dialogues can now be configured if they pause the game and if they close after the action is taken. Every dialogue can now have inputs and can submit information. New keybind called Quick Actions can be added to allow access to content configured dialogues so they can be opened with a key press like advancements, for example. The resource pack version is now 63, which adds an oversized in-GUI item model field, which controls whether items can render outside the bounds of their inventory slot. There's a new player head special model type to handle player profile texture loading and rendering. Some fixed bugs of note in 1.21.6 pre-release 1. Lectern model extends past inventory slots. Players can desync from their mounts when jumping on a Happy Ghast. Players can fall through Happy Ghasts. FPS drops due to clouds. Items bigger than the size of a slot incorrectly bleed over into other items, and the GUI items disappear at high screen resolutions. There are plenty of bug fixes in this snapshot, along with the full details of the technical changes to the dialogues and resource packs. You can find those in the Minecraft.net changelog, linked in our show notes at thespawntrunks.com.
If you head on over to YouTube, you'll also find a behind-the-scenes look at a Minecraft movie, specifically some of the mobs and how they were realized for the design of the film. So on Warner Bros. Entertainment's channel, they published a 13-minute behind-the-scenes featurette exploring the live-action looks and on-screen performances of Minecraft mobs with expert designers and artists. Some of the actors even chip in about their experience working with the performers. You can see how iconic mobs like the piglins and villagers were transitioned from the game to the movie through animation and live action costuming. I've only caught the first few minutes of this before we could start the show, but it's a really interesting watch so far. So if you're interested in movie production and costuming at all, I highly recommend this. It's really worth your time.
I really thought this was cool. I was just assuming, I think, because I sort of tuned out when I was watching the Minecraft movie, that a lot of it was CGI. And I knew that obviously the things that the real actors that we were watching were picking up and touching were practical props. We've seen a couple of featurettes here and talked about it on the show where the watermelons and the potatoes and things like that were all physically there. We've heard from some content creators that visited the set and thought how cool it was to see all these backdrop things. But what I did not realize, and this is what really grabbed me about the little YouTube preview on this video, was the villagers were mocap people and actors and dancers and physical performers in suits and had their arms kind of like bound in front of them just like a villager, and they had to figure out how to move and bounce around like a villager. And they had like this head construction that would allow an eye line for actors that were, you know, in the scene, or even just other villagers, that was then replaced with a CG head. And that to me was just really, really interesting. I remember saying about a Minecraft movie just how consistent and seamless, once you're in the overworld and the Minecraft world, it does all seem to be very cohesive. And I think that a good chunk of that is because so much of it was practical, right down to like the villagers being like the only thing digital about them was their face and their expressions and their animation. Yeah. Everything else was physically there. Mine is probably the villager kids. The villager kids were probably fully animated, but it was wild to see just how much of that was in there. And I think another really good example was the puppeteer / mocap artist for Dennis the dog. Yeah, Jack Black actually had like a box that looked like a wolf head to touch, to look at, and then that dog would also react and give like motion cues. Now obviously Dennis in the movie was completely animated, but those animators would have had timing and improvisational expression and planned, you know, positioning from the performer live on the set, which again, just super cool stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And it's also kind of wild if you watch that segment for the actor who's also doing the physical performance of the animal, not just the guy who's like moving the head and controlling like the facial expressions and giving the actor something to interact with, but there is somebody who's just running on all fours in a very like animalistic way. And I'm like, the physicality required to do that is phenomenal. And those are the things that go so unseen when you're looking at the finished product of a film like this. So it's, again, really exciting to see how much of it was done practically and how much of it was real people adding their performance to what would eventually become overlaid and composited with computer effects. And I think that's great. I think it's really cool to see more behind the scenes. Once again, I think one of the key elements of showing this movie to players and people who might have been a bit more cynical about them making a movie about Minecraft is that those people respect how things are crafted. And so it's really interesting to see a little bit more behind the scenes information on that. And I presume when it reaches a physical release, which I hope they will do, because I am really a big fan of like physical releases, even in this digital era, then some of those featurettes and things that you're seeing on YouTube will also end up on like a Blu-ray package or something like that.
Right,
I think that's the stuff that I loved about like the Lord of the Rings movies, was the kind of behind the scenes Weta workshop, like how was all of this done? How were the practical effects made? And I think they've got a wealth of that to share with people who might be interested in getting into the movie industry through just their excitement at a young age seeing something like the Minecraft movie.
So I don't have a Minecraft movie high on my rewatch list. However, if I was able to rewatch the movie just like the Lord of the Rings with a cast commentary, and then separately with like a director and an art director commentary, and maybe
Yeah.
even someone like Jeb on it as well. I would watch the whole thing again to hear
Yeah.
those thoughts, like those production thoughts and behind the scenes. So not just featurettes, but like the live long 90-minute runtime commentary. 100% would be down for that.
Yeah, the DVD commentary is quickly becoming a lost art, and that's a real shame because I'm the same. I would love to hear some like on-set anecdotes from the actors. I'd love to hear some more of the design philosophy coming from the people involved with production, and it seems like they've got a lot to say about it because they've clearly put their heart and soul into it. And this movie was in development for long enough that I'm sure a lot of things have gone, to various drawing boards here and there and come back with different and new effects and ways of doing things. So yeah, hopefully we get something like that. Either way, I'm pretty sure the movie is available to stream digitally now, so if anyone wants to revisit it, they can, and there's lots of little companion videos still coming out to show that the buzz around the Minecraft movie is still alive and kicking. In the meantime, the game is still alive and kicking too, because we have pre-releases for 121.6, which I'm thinking maybe indicates, I'm going to say now, like either a June 10th or 17th release. Those are both Tuesdays, and typically the release for a full gameplay drop is now Tuesdays. So I'm hoping that in the next couple of weeks, we're going to see Happy Ghasts arriving in everyone's vanilla worlds.
I could see the 10th. It depends on how many pre-releases come out in the next little while.
Yeah.
Or do we even get another pre-release 2 tomorrow, or is it like a release candidate? Like I think that would what happens this week I think would heavily sway whether I think it's going to be the 10th or the 17th. I 100% think it's coming out in June. Like I think that's happening. And so I'm excited for that. And I I did like the title. I do find it a little bit humorous though, because Chase the Skies implies a bit of haste, like a race.
And
the Happy Ghast is not that. Like it's very slow.
Yeah.
It's like you can see that those comedy cuts to like, everybody jump on your Happy Ghast, let's go. Cut to like turtles just slowly going turtle speed. Like that's something I can see is in like a trailer for promoting this stuff. Something we haven't seen yet, obviously, is normally when they do these drops, there's like an animated trailer, with cartoon versions of the characters, and so we haven't seen an animated Happy Ghast in like, not inside the game. We've seen game renderings, but we've not seen like an animated version. And so I'm really curious the next time that they do a Minecraft Live, when they do that little animation bop, at the start of all those things, what does the Happy Ghast look like when it's fully animated and has some personality and moves around and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I can see them doing that with Ghastlings, because they're the sort of cuter, like younger version of Happy Ghast before they grow up. But then, it's definitely going to be like the Happy Ghasts are bringing everybody to wherever Minecraft Live is happening, with like the boats hanging from them, the hot air balloon aesthetic that we were talking about before. Yeah, I think that's a shoe-in for some sort of animated feature, and who knows, maybe we'll get one around the time the drop actually arrives. But I agree. I think Chase the Skies is a good name. My previous favorite, like, speculative name for the update was Ghastly Summer. I think a couple of people have suggested that, and I thought that was really funny, but I can see why they didn't go with something like that, because it's sort of a negative positive kind of thing, and while it's not, particularly controversial, Mojang has this very kind of wholesome, like, forward-thinking, optimistic kind of tone to a lot of the way they're presenting drops lately, and so I think it's going to make sense to have something like, Chase the Skies feels aspirational, it feels like adventurous, and Ghastly Summer really felt like what most British people say when it rains between the months of June and September. So, I think it makes sense to have Chase the Skies be sort of the theme of this one, and I think it inspires a little bit of player emotion towards what they can do with Happy Ghast as well. It kind of gives players a little bit of a hook to go, oh yeah, maybe we could like start using them for like races or courses of some kind of like flying obstacle course or something, and give players something to chase when the drop actually arrives.
I think it also implies chasing builds in the sky, like chasing inspiration, chasing, the kind of things that you might want to do that you couldn't do before easily. I think that it could also be something that helps players in different modes, like flat worlds or peaceful or something like that. Because if you don't have access to Elytra, then now you've got flying for the first time, right?
Yeah,
and I think that's a good way to look at it too.
Yeah, that's something we're going to touch on in the main discussion later as well, because Joel and I have both been thinking a little bit about how we're going to use the Happy Ghast and how the community might react to the Happy Ghast now it's actually on our doorsteps, as it were.
Speaking of community, moving into the chunk mail this week, if you'd like to email the show, the listener email address is spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. Please keep your emails short and to the point. It does help us include them in the show. And depending on when the Chase the Skies update drops, you can write us and let us know what you think about the Happy Ghast and what your plans are for the Happy Ghast when it arrives. So do that. It's spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. And Jonny has got the first one.
Yes, this email comes in from Brian D, who is a landscape artist member of our Spawn Chunks community. So thank you so much for supporting the show. The subject is Happy Ghast ++, and this was sent just ahead of pre-release 1 dropping earlier. So a fairly recent set of thoughts on the Happy Ghast. Brian writes, I'm wondering what features you think may be added to the Happy Ghast. Some things I thought of and wonder about are Ghast armor. Since the announcement, I've heard the community talking about air combat, and I wonder if, like dogs and horses, we will see Ghast armor, though the idea of Ghast in the Nether spawning with armor sounds less than ideal. Armor trim, also a possibility. If we add armor to the Happy Ghast, that means we could have armor trim, and with the Happy Ghast being such a large canvas, it could look very cool. Also, ghasts with a chest. As a form of transportation with multiple seats, I wonder if, like boats, we'll be able to replace some of those seats with chests. The use of the Happy Ghast for builders has been pointed out, but what if it could also have storage of the materials you're working with up there with you? Single-player adventurers could use it as a mobile base. While 3 chests wouldn't be enough for most storage systems, with shulker boxes it could be a lot. Also, Ghast saddlebags came to mind. What if we could use some bundles to craft saddlebags? Brian floated off into the sunset with all of his items tucked away in his Ghast saddlebags.
So obviously Mojang has said that Chase the Skies features are complete, but I do like the idea of allowing players to have an extra chest or 3 on top of the Happy Ghast. And I know that they already have boats being leashed to the Ghast, which includes a chest boat, but that's not within your reach when you're riding a Ghast and building, which is what I'm probably going to be using a Ghast for if I do, is going to be taking some supplies up to a large build in the sky, bridge, whatever, and using it that way. So the saddlebags seem kind of redundant with the chest idea. I think the chest idea is better. And I would also imagine that if you were to add chests to a Happy Ghast, it would probably look like a saddlebag. I don't think it would look like a chest just sitting on the top of a Happy Ghast. I think that Mojang would probably add some Minecraft magic and have it look like the chests are draped or strapped to the top of the Ghast and sort of some sort of harness.
Similar to how you see them on like donkeys and stuff like that, where they have the chest poking out of either side. Yeah.
I obviously if it was to ever become a thing, it would be in a future drop, and I think that would be a really good way to add some functionality to the Ghast. And I think it speaks to the things that we've been talking about earlier too, which is just that when you go up on a Happy Ghast, someone the other week had said like, well, what about a snowball on the stick? And I think my response was, I don't want another thing in my inventory to have to hold while I'm up there, because it's probably going to be full of building materials. And I think having those extra building materials with you, and even if, and I don't know this because I've not messed around with the Happy Ghast in person yet, but even if you could just place a shulker box or place an ender chest on the top of the Happy Ghast, right? Like just to access that stuff without having to put it down somewhere else and like exit the Happy Ghast. Like I feel like that could help things a lot. I think that Ghast armor and armor trim, while a nice idea for RP, are not that practical. And I don't necessarily see that being a thing. I don't think that air combat with Ghast is going to be all that exciting. Like it's pretty slow. Good for a gag, but I don't think it would be something that would be widespread. It could be just a fun, like a fun, laughable mini game, like not something to be seriously taken. Like I can't see Happy Ghast being brought into traditional PvP in a competitive way.
Yeah, same. Like, I think there might be some people who try to make it work in a survival server context, or maybe even in minigames where you can just, use it kind of like Spleef or like Sky Wars, where people are expected to die fairly quickly. But then Ghast armor is just going to prolong that. It could be like Wolf armor, where they don't take any damage until the armor breaks, and maybe you could try and reinforce it as they go, but you don't really get... Like, Ghast combat is inevitably going to be ranged combat, unless maybe you jump over to somebody and it's like you've boarded the ship. But I don't really see that happening too easily. It's too easy to outpace somebody if you move exactly the same speed as them, and there's no real speed control, so there's not much in the way of like skill-based flying going on here aside from how you move around in 3D space. But yeah, Ghasts are fragile, bow combat is powerful, and I think the main problem with, especially on a survival server, is how long it takes to regenerate a happy Ghast from the dried Ghast, which is the only way of... You have to craft them. They are renewable in that sense, but you can't breed them together to get to the Ghastling phase and skip the phase where it starts as a block and you have to wait 20 minutes for it to hatch or rehydrate or whatever terminology we're using. So yeah, like Ghast armor could be a possibility in future, especially if Mojang introduces more flying threats to the happy Ghast. But as of right now, I don't see much aside from maybe like it being difficult to land in an area where there's skeletons shooting at you. But yeah, most of the time I expect to avoid hostile mobs at ground level. You're just going to stay up in the sky for a few extra minutes until it's safe to come down and the mobs have despawned or burned in the sun. Armor trims I deem a little bit less likely than Ghast armor. We already have a harness in 16 colors. I think that's probably... a little bit too niche of a use for armor trim, because every player is going to interact with armor at some stage, most likely, so everyone's going to have a chance to use those armor trims, whereas some people who just don't want to interact with the happy Ghast are going to miss out on that being a feature at all. So I have a feeling the harnesses are going to be exempt, and, even if we get Ghast armor, I feel like Wolf armor would probably be the next candidate in line for an armor trim upgrade. The last thing is this idea of using a Ghast as a mobile base. It kind of reminds me of the dinosaurs that you can build platforms on in Ark Survival Evolved, where you could have like basically a house moving around on the back of a giant like sauropod kind of thing. And sadly, I doubt that's a mechanic that would translate all that well to Minecraft. I think part of what they want to do with each of these mounts, whether it's a happy Ghast or a donkey or a horse, is like they give them each unique selling points, right? And the main thing with happy Ghasts is their ability to leash stuff to them so that it can be carried underneath as you travel vertically, the hot air balloon model of things. And so putting chests on the top of it sort of feels counterintuitive to that idea, and makes things like donkeys and mules and llama caravans and things like that less viable, because you've sort of done this one-size-fits-all approach to the happy Ghast at that stage. Yeah. Any of those animals could now be dangled below the happy Ghast because you can leash them to it, so that's also a possibility. But I think, ender chests and shulker boxes are going to make saddlebags and that kind of thing for a Ghast fairly redundant anyway. Like, once you've got an inventory full of shulker boxes for the player and an ender chest full of shulker boxes, as long as you have somewhere to put them down while you're up there in the sky, I think it's going to make perfect sense to just leave those mechanics to player inventory management instead of adding them to the Ghast as an afterthought. I'll admit that the ender chests and shulker boxes aren't as accessible to peaceful players, so the fact that peaceful players have the opportunity to fly around on happy Ghasts where they don't have access to elytra could mean that some sort of combination of flying transport and storage would be helpful, but that's also why you have chest boats leashed up to a happy Ghast in the first place. And as far as I can tell, the number of chest boats you can leash to a happy Ghast is quite high. So if you want to bring your entire base with you as like a floating platform, you probably can. Just expect it to fly away as soon as you've gotten off it.
Right. Our next email comes in from Lydia the Sloth. Updating mobs is the subject. Hey, Pix and Joel. After the wolf, pig, cow, and chicken variants, and the Ghastling and Happy Ghast, I'm curious as to what other mobs might be getting attention. I personally would love to see some more of the classic mobs get some new uses and renewed purpose. What if you could tame a bunny and they could give you a jump boost when you fed them? What if you could attach a cart to a horse and you could put chests in the cart so you can carry around more stuff? What are some mobs you think could or should be getting looked at? What changes do you think would be made to them? Love the podcast. Lydia the Sloth hit the ground too hard when jumping around with her new pet bunny.
This is an interesting one. I feel like for a while we've been talking about like additional mobs and like other variants here and there. And it's funny to think of the rabbit as a classic mob. I don't think about rabbits too often in general, but they had been added around the time I started playing Minecraft, which to me made them feel very new at the time. And I've always just thought of them as new because I've not interacted with them all that much since. And then I remember that, yeah, I've been playing Minecraft for 2/3 of its lifespan now, so I can't really comment on that. But yeah, I don't know if there's too much that I would personally throw out there as mobs that need variants and things like that. Like, I'm more looking to Mojang to provide something new in the way that the Sniffer was new. Like, having something that feels like a Minecraft born and bred critter as opposed to something that's a real world animal or an animal from an existing folklore, fantasy setting and reinventing it for Minecraft. Like, I think Minecraft can still be a wellspring of really original ideas, thinking about things like the glare and some of the other mobs that didn't make it through mob votes at the previous Minecraft Live presentations. I think there's room for stuff like that to creep in now that they have spent some time updating things like chickens and cows to have more variants. But you had a few really interesting ideas about this, Joel, so I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I noticed is that in the email inbox lately, any kind of idea for improving a mob or improving a mechanic tend to circle around on carrying more stuff. So I feel like players are starting to voice like the other ways that they think an inventory improvement could happen. I think people have maybe given up on stack sizes changing and an UI change or a capacity change for the player and thought, okay, let's get more creative and still ask for more inventory space, but let's do it in more fun and interesting ways. And that seems to be kind of a theme with some of the things I'm seeing, specifically like the horse with the cart, that kind of thing. I mean, look, as someone that just spent 4 years building a medieval town, a horse with a cart would be awesome. Like, I would just purely decorative, like just to have around would be very, very cool. I think broad stroke for me with regards to older mobs, to address Lydia the Sloth's question, I think that an animation update for everything would be one way to improve older mobs, but not have to worry too much about gameplay features. I think it would just go a long way to bring Minecraft up into like a modern aesthetic. And I know there are mods and data packs out there that you can get to like improve the animations of things across the board. And I think they look really good. And I think that that's the kind of thing that could be done, for vanilla Minecraft to help improve it. So that's kind of like a broad stroke. But looking at the variants for like cows, chickens, pigs, the kind of animals that there are many different versions of in our real world, the first thing I thought of was bears. We've got polar bears and we've got pandas, but we don't have anything like a black bear, brown bear, koala bear. Like, we don't have any of the different kinds of bears. I know koala bear is a weird example, but like those kind of things I think could exist in Minecraft, and it would be a cool thing to bring in. It would add some ambiance. I don't think it would necessarily bring a lot of gameplay. I can't see a lot of positive interactions with running into a grizzly bear in Minecraft. Do we need another hostile mob that's around in the daytime? Like right now, walking through the woods, when I was collecting my wildflowers and my leaf litter, I maybe saw a cow, maybe a chicken, but like there was really nothing else. I did see a fox when I was in a taiga, but there's really not a lot of life. There's no deer, there's no birds. So I think adding a bear would be cool. I don't think it would be a bad thing to have something for players to avoid. I don't think a positive interaction would be good. I think that much like polar bears, you kind of want to treat it like, respect the wildlife kind of idea. But I think that having a couple different bears, especially because you could do, and this could be like the Northern Hemisphere, North American kind of in me looking for like a black bear, a brown bear, or a grizzly bear. I think a grizzly would be a really good silhouette to be different from like polar bear, very distinct, grizzly bear, very distinct, panda, very distinct. And then I don't know, maybe there's a different kind of bear in, Europe or in Asia that could be brought in to be both educational, from a natural world perspective, but then also just add like a size variant or something to go into a different biome. I don't know in terms of an imaginary Minecraft animal that would be akin to a bear. I'm not sure what they could come up with, but something like that could be cool. if they decided to go down that road. I do like it when they add larger mobs. I think that that's a fun addition. Like chickens, fine. Sniffer, really cool. Like it is just there's something really neat about a large mob like that lumbering around in Minecraft. Same thing with a camel. I don't particularly use them, but it's just cool to have something that large as a mob in the game. So that could be fun. The other thing that I was thinking of in terms of hostile mobs, because I think the examples that Lydia the Sloth gave were all passive mobs, but ghasts. Now that Happy Ghasts exists and have brought a bunch of different additions to the overworld, I could see ghasts in the Nether getting a little bit of an overhaul. Maybe different size variants. What if there's a smaller ghast or ghastling, whatever you want to call it, that is maybe shooting more frequently? Maybe the fireballs are weaker. Maybe they're not fireballs at all and it just shoots blocks of coal at you. Does that mean there could be a cool player farm happening? What does that mean in terms of the threat in the Nether? Because I don't necessarily, as a builder, want more things aggravating me in the Nether, but I don't feel overly challenged in the Nether either. Like the regular ghasts, if you just keep moving, they miss you unless you're running straight at them. It's really not that difficult to avoid being shot at. But if there was a ghast version of the chicken jockey, in terms of speed and threat, when you think of zombie versus chicken zombie, my first experience with a chicken jockey in the overworld was I really didn't like them. Like I really found them challenging. They always hit me at least once or twice. So having something a little bit faster in the Nether from a ghast could be interesting. I don't know about any other abilities or drops. I mean, that's something that I didn't really get to, but I think that would be a good way to go. And the low-hanging fruit for me was also husks, like having husks drop sand. And like we've had that come up before, but I feel like it's worth a mention. Any kind of way to help players get renewable resources via mob changes, I think would be a pretty welcome addition from most players.
Yeah, I would fully agree with that. I think the main problem with bears is that I think whenever they add real-world animals now, they want to make sure that the interaction, if not positive, is at least neutral, with the exception of like farm mobs where they are more commonly thought of as animals for produce, like for meat or eggs or leather or whatever. And so I think the reason polar bears didn't go over well with players to begin with was that they didn't have any real function to them because you were supposed to leave them alone. And I think adding that aspect to other biomes makes it just kind of compounds the problem. I think people typically don't build in snowy biomes often anyway because there are like the aesthetics are different. People don't always want the kind of cold environment around them unless they're working on a very specific style of build. And polar bears, I think, contribute to that. You don't end up exploring the icy plains biomes for especially long. You're usually just passing through, gathering a few resources, grabbing some packed ice or whatever, and then leaving again because you don't really want to have a polar bear sneak up on you whilst you're out there. Even the fact that they're neutral unless there's a cub around, I think, just kind of helps to balance that experience, so it's not like when they tried to implement the killer rabbit that was just going to randomly spawn and be a difficult encounter for a player. But I think, bears are a tricky proposition. When you were talking about that, I like the idea of deer more than I like the idea of bears as far as ambient forest, like woodland mobs go. Because then at least you could treat them a little bit more like the cows, pigs, and sheep and so forth. And they're either an animal that you kill for meat, or they're just sort of there and they're maybe a little bit more scared of the player in the same way that foxes are, but they're just there to add a bit of life and ambience and occasional noises in the background and that kind of thing. I think really, though, having looked at biome density in terms of like the amount of blocks that are around you recently, I've noticed myself doing this when I'm going to the resource world in Misadventures and trying to find mobs. I head for a plains biome, I head for a savanna, I head for anywhere the landscape is more open, because in forests I'm certain that there is enough open space around me for passive mobs to have spawned, but the reason you don't see any is because the foliage is so dense that they're often like just a few trees away, and just the amount of stuff that's in between you and them makes it feel like you are more alone than you are. And I feel like that would be the same problem with bears. If they added them to a typical temperate forest biome, you probably wouldn't see them all that much for the same reason. They're not going to be out in the open as much, which might be realistic behavior, but I certainly don't see it being something that a bear encounter is going to make a whole lot of sense if they're just kind of casually wandering around a forest. If anything, I could see them implementing bears in something like an old growth pine taiga, where you've got pods all on the ground. And it feels a bit more like a national park, whereas like nature preserves are more commonly situated in the real world anyway, and so there are likely to be more large wild animals and like bears fishing in rivers and that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think there's some cool ideas there. It just depends what Mojang wants from a gameplay perspective, and it seems like a lot of the passive mobs that they add want to add gameplay along with them.
I'd rather them come up with new stuff, like you said. That's where I land on this. In the end, is that I'd rather see something interesting, fantasy related, or dimensional related, whatever they could come up with. I think that would be more interesting and fun, because, like you said, natural animals tend to not have much gameplay when you think about like deers and bears and like the more wildlife, we'll say, as opposed to like livestock. And so I'd rather go with something new.
Yeah, and they've given us a really great example of how Minecraft's original creations can be improved throughout the years with the Happy Ghast. So let's talk about that for our main discussion. We wanted to take a little bit of a look at how Happy Ghasts are going to change our perspective and the community's perspective on interacting with the world around them. I expect it to change approaches to building, not just in the nature of being able to use it as a platform to build from, but also what kind of builds complement the Happy Ghast itself. We talked a bit about this on our most recent Patreon Hangout, actually, where I was talking about if we see a bunch of people jumping into the update right away once Chase the Skies arrives, we might see a bunch of people in the next hangout posting pictures of their Ghast garages and things like that, like little hangars or stables of sorts for their new mounts. And so are we planning on building stuff like that? How do we plan to use the Happy Ghast as a building tool, and maybe even what sort of mini games it inspires was the main topic I wanted to cover this week.
I think I had mentioned before that elevators and moving platforms are kind of where I think of first for the Happy Ghast. And I think that one of the things we might see, certainly something I want to try, is building a track, something that limits the movement of the Happy Ghast down to one or two of the cardinal directions. So if you need to cross a chasm and you're using the Happy Ghast as like a bridging mob, as opposed to something that you're just going to jump on and fly wherever you want to go. It's like a way to control not just the view of the player, but like the direction that they're traveling. So if someone's visiting your base, they have to ride the Happy Ghast to cross the drawbridge, so to speak. Or for me, I'm thinking of a way to try to incorporate it into either a sci-fi build or maybe even our little Minecraft version of a modern city, where maybe we use them as elevators. Like right now, the elevators in the modern city are water columns. We just kind of said, look, this is going to be the easiest way to get up and down. Let's just say that this modern city has some sort of water elevator technology, and that's just what's happening, rather than trying to build redstone elevators or stairs or ladders or whatever. And I feel like the Happy Ghast as an elevator could be interesting. Now, unfortunately, you have to sit down on it in order to pilot it. So you're going to be sitting on the elevator, and then depending on how big the elevator shaft is, your feet might look like they get cut off. So like you'd have to find the right design. You'd have to find the right way. But the fact that you can fly straight up with them is pretty cool. Unfortunately, you can't fly straight down. You have to fly down at an angle. But again, if you restrict that movement, if the Ghast is basically flying down at an angle into a wall, does that then translate to direct vertical, like downward motion? So that would be something I'd want to experiment with. And I think that could be really cool depending on your level of RP and what you're kind of going for. It reminds me of something like a Studio Ghibli film or a Pixar movie with monsters, where like the monsters have actual world functions, that
totally.
kind of stuff. Or I think we've mentioned it before, like the Flintstones, like where the Flintstones had animals and dinosaurs doing different things, like a pterodactyl as a record player. Like a Ghast as an elevator could be really, really interesting. I could also just see yourself parking a Ghast inside of a build, and say you've got like a Ghast sushi chef kind of hovering behind this counter of food, and you can just imagine all the tentacles doing the thing. I think we've all seen that in a Disney cartoon where an octopus is a chef and he's got like a knife and a spatula and a bowl and a spoon, and everything's all happening at once. And I can only imagine the animator that had to do that. But like that kind of stuff could be, I mean, you have to suspend some disbelief to have that, but having a Ghast as part of your build as like an NPC is a really neat idea too.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's the chef at Harryhausen's in Monsters Inc. has like the tentacles and stuff. Like I'm pretty sure I've seen something like that. Yeah. But no, I agree. I think the interesting about when you were saying how you weren't certain if Ghast would suit the aesthetic of the modern city and the notion of using them as an elevator and it sort of breaking a little bit of the immersion to have your player model kind of like clipping in and stuff. I think the solution to that is to take the elevator design in the other direction you said, where it's a Studio Ghibli style thing and there are creatures there that are here to help you rather than trying to disguise it as an elevator. Because if you want like realistic elevator movement, you can also do that with redstone. Like if your priority isn't speed of travel, you can create like an elevator carriage and a piston flying machine and do that kind of stuff with it without having to worry about the Ghast being present, and it's also automated as opposed to player controlled. But with player control, you have a lot more range, you don't have to do as much, redstone wiring, and maybe it can fit into some interesting spaces where a redstone mechanism just wouldn't be viable. So I think as long as you go with the fact that it's clearly a creature, is probably going to be making some sort of noise, it's got to have a saddle on it so you can ride it, so there's clearly going to be a visible texture of that in some way. You can't really pass it off as like just the carpet in an elevator if you're going to have to like sit down on it and ride it to move. So I do think there's a little bit of suspension of disbelief required for some of that, and I think for other approaches to it, you're going to look into how you can use it creatively while still very visibly being what it is. And I think it's going to be really fun to see people's Ghast garages. I think they're probably going to be the hot new build because people don't want them to float around constantly. Like I think keeping them in one place is going to be vital for like player comfort and interactability with them, even with the new lead mechanics. But I can see a lot of people making them so that the Ghast just has like the smiley face sticking out of the front door, so you can still very clearly tell that there is some kind of creature in there. But then, you flip up the trapdoors at the corners and that's what allows it out. I think the key to them is going to be understanding their hitbox, understanding where they can kind of squeeze through a gap of like 3x3 and where that becomes too narrow for them to pass through. And then also interactions with what it's like when the player is riding them. Like you need to make sure that the Ghast can fit, but you also need to make sure the driver doesn't suffocate in the ceiling. And so when you're flying in, maybe like a ceiling or like the upper floor of it is made out of trapdoors, so you can very easily step out of that and it doesn't suffocate you as you fly through it. Even multiple passengers needing to be taken into account is something that's quite interesting here. Like if you end up using them as like a train of sorts, then having multiple passengers sit on it, how does that work for the station at the end? Are you going to have to figure out where those players step off and make sure there's a platform that accommodates them and doesn't suffocate any of them in the process, but still contains the Ghast? That's going to be an interesting logistical challenge. And so that's what I'm looking forward to builders puzzling their way through. It's going to be one of the first things I do when I spend a bit more time with the Happy Ghast, is test where can I stuff this thing that it's going to make the most sense to just have it hang out there until I need it again. And, how utilitarian does that look? How much can we dress it up and decorate it? Can we have the Ghast as like almost the face of a clock tower or something like that? And then, the mechanism comes apart and the Ghast can fly out of the center. I think having a face as a clock face, it just feels very appealing to me.
I looked it up while you were talking, and the Happy Ghast is a 4x4 block hitbox, according to the Minecraft wiki.
Right.
And I don't know about you, but I don't like doing even builds. I tend to want to do odd builds like 5 and 7. So immediately I'm thinking like, well, if you build a 5x5 area for the Ghast to park in, what do you line that with? Is it glass panes? Is it walls? Like, what do you do to bring that 5x5 down to just a little bit larger than a 4? Because if it's exactly a 4, you're going to have to be very precise with your parking. You
Yeah.
think parallel parking is hard in real life. Try parking a Ghast in the exact same size space that it fits. And I think that that's probably what, the happy accident is going to be like, what block, gives you just the right amount of space that you can get in there that, as you said, will allow you to get the happy Ghast sorted the way you want, but then also some other sort of quick preventative measure for it to fly away. It could be just the fact that I recently watched Andor, but I think of the way that TIE fighters are launched. They, unlike the Alliance ships in Star Wars that take off vertically like an airplane, like a vertical takeoff airplane in our world, the TIE fighters are like hung, and so they're kind of dropped, and then they take off from there. They're kind of like dropped out of Star Destroyers, or even hangars. So granted, that doesn't work for a happy Ghast because you have to sit on the top of it. So a claw coming down from the ceiling doesn't work, but a claw from behind or a claw from below, some sort of cool sci-fi looking thing that grabs the happy Ghast. Maybe when you get off we'll call it like the fingernails of the claw, like grip in and keep the Ghast from going higher. There's a bunch of different ideas that you can come up with. Even if you're not using them every day, having the one Ghast that you fly around with, but 2 others or 3 others in the Ghast hangar that are like gripped from the top by a claw looking design or build would just look cool. Like it would be a really fun way to come up with different ideas to decorate and address this new flying mob. So I think there's a bunch of different things like that. And going back to like the limited track, I think that if you did the same thing but horizontal, that could be a cool thing for base tours, mini games. Think like it's a small world at the Disney World kind of ride, we'll call it. Having a Ghast that goes very slow. Players have done this with roller coasters and things like that with minecarts in the past, but minecarts travel at a specific speed and it's hard to get them to go slow. And I feel like with the happy Ghast, the player riding it could just, hit forward or press the right direction. And if you have a track kind of going around, it would be a really cool way to like showcase something that you've built or have an experience of like, welcome to my base. And you're going to slowly go around down this like walking pedway or whatever on a Ghast to give the player time to admire the build that you've made, like look at the ceiling and all that kind of stuff. And I think that that's an interesting way to approach like limiting the movement of a Ghast for not just a build that is a place to park it, but a place to fly it in a controlled environment.
I think just going on theme park ride vibes, since it's a 4x4 hitbox, it's going to be fairly easy to move the happy Ghast around using water streams, provided that it can't fly upwards. So I can imagine putting players on a Ghast and even having like a 4-player seating arrangement, and it being like a very tame river rapids kind of thing, when everyone gets in the tube and they're all facing inwards towards each other. It's sort of that, but facing outwards, and you end up, guiding players around like a base or some sort of like underwater, like underground cave grotto kind of build, and having some stuff like with the happy Ghast as the means of conveyance so that you can fit 4 people on it instead of relying on boats. And boats having a smaller hitbox, it feels a little different when they kind of go through water streams like that. But you could disguise the water stream entirely given how big the happy Ghast is going to be. So I think that's the other fun thing about this, is it's such a big rideable thing, which is unlike even camels, probably the largest rideable mob we had before this. I think it's really fascinating to see this taken to much larger extremes, and what you can do to leverage that as a benefit. Like, how do you disguise the fact that you're being moved around automatically while the Ghast is just big enough that it covers up the water stream?
Yeah, when I was thinking about the ride, I was thinking that maybe some sort of I don't want to say a hook, but like some sort of lip to the tunnel that you've created. Like if it needs a 4x4 block area to go up, all you have to do is cover half a block, and that might prevent it from going up. Back when the Happy Ghast first came out, I remember Exumavoy did a video where he had put just a couple of blocks in different corners, and that kept the Ghast from flying around and from moving. So I feel like having something that has like almost like a track, like a rail that would like lock your Ghast in place, leaving you free to be creative, like you said, with all this other stuff. And then possibly at the bottom of that 4x4 area have like water streams and being able to move things around. And it would be really interesting if, I guess the Ghast doesn't really fly down natively, but if you got to the end of like one of those water flume situations and then straight down was the next option, sort of like a waterfall or a flume drop or something like that. Again, probably not going to happen that fast, not going to be that accelerating, for players, but having even just having like signs or arrows, using like your magenta glazed terracotta, telling players like, now that you've reached the end of the track, press down to like, continue on the way and go to the next phase. I think there could be some really interesting things there. And I, in particular, where I've got this sci-fi build coming up in my mind, am thinking about using them as like moving platforms in the way that sci-fi have like hover platforms and getting from one area of a build to another. I just don't know what is going to be the way to do that that's going to make them feel guided. I still feel like one of the things for me that's, when we were talking earlier about missing features for a Ghast, I really wish there was a way to lure them to a specific block without the player, like have them be attracted to something that you could place on the ground or reveal, and have them just like zone in straight on that and just travel directly towards it. And I think that would be a really fun way to, I don't want to say automate, but have some movement to your builds when you are not the one causing the movement. And I don't know. I mean, having a Ghast that is flying around in your build or city or town, whatever it is, and just making sure that the roofs and the buildings are close enough that the Ghast can't actually leave that area. Like, you could have the Ghast in an arena flying around naturally and just not able to actually leave the area, and it would still add that motion that I'm talking about. So there are some ideas out there that could work.
Yeah, you can, I believe, you can restrict a Ghast from flying too far away from the area that it was last interacted with, or the area that it was grown from a Ghastling into a Happy Ghast, so that it kind of treats that area as home, at least on a temporary basis. And hopefully that's a robust enough mechanic that people can contain them, like you said, in like a larger area like that without feeling like they float off the way bees have done for quite some time. But yeah, I like the idea of using them as floating platforms, and I wonder if maybe like powdered snow blocks dispensed from a dispenser could be a really interesting way of doing that. The only problem then becomes that your Ghast, like, if left to its own devices, nosedives any powdered snow that it finds in a grove biome or something like that, and then you run into the issue of like having to don your leather boots or sink through the powdered snow in your attempts to get it. But yeah, I think there's options there for the future, maybe for other ways that Happy Ghasts can be improved. But in the meantime, I do think, yeah, neat floating platforms in a parkour course. The movement mechanics will take a bit of wrangling, but I'm sure players will figure that out. And I think it might be a fun skill-based thing to, time it right so that you're jumping onto it as it's in the most advantageous position to help you move on to the next part of the course, and having to like jump back to the platform that you started from if, let's say, like the Ghast didn't fly in the direction you needed it to, it didn't get close enough to the objective that you could use it as a stepping stone from one to the other, and having to kind of go back and reposition could be an interesting obstacle in a parkour setting. And I'm curious about a couple of other movement things, how they interact with stuff like wind charges. I'm pretty sure wind charges do damage most things just a little bit. It's not like throwing a snowball where it's like no harm done whatsoever. But I kind of wonder if you could repel them harmlessly with the force of something like a wind charge. Could you do a kind of like air soccer kind of thing with Ghasts and have like big goalposts, like a football goal, like a big kind of like American football or rugby post kind of style goal, and have the attempts to shepherd the Ghast into that area to score. Could be kind of interesting. But again, in terms of like the Ghast armor being necessary, I think if wind charges damage them, then that leads to all kinds of issues. But I think there's some interactivity between the Happy Ghast and stuff like breezes, things that have been added in recent updates. You look at like being able to jump onto a Happy Ghast from ground level and just land on the top of it. You could imagine doing a wind charge launch to get yourself up there because you need a bit of height. And so there's a bit of interactivity that I'm looking forward to exploring there and seeing if jumping onto a Happy Ghast from a specific platform, wind charge assisted, could be a fun mechanic when using them for like minigame stuff.
Yeah, I wonder how responsive they are to like landing on them from height, and like, can you die if you do you take fall damage if you jump onto a gas from too high? Like, I don't know.
I think
that's an interesting idea.
I think they do still act as a solid surface when you land on them. So like the instant that you end up colliding with the top of a Happy Ghast hitbox, they should become a solid platform. So I think I have taken full damage jumping from one to the other in the short video I did about them in the snapshots. But I need to figure out what the parameters there are, if they limit full damage in the same way that hay bales and things like that do, or if it's just a flat like full damage, same as it would be if you landed on a stone block.
Yeah, I mean, Happy Ghast bucket clutch is the new meta, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. But I think the main thing people are going to be doing, and I imagine you and I will probably be most interested in using them to build with and detail things with. I think floating islands and sky bases are the obvious thing. They're likely to be the first places that players' minds go, especially since once those sky bases are built, the Happy Ghasts fit in almost as a native creature of those environments, since they have the ability to sort of float around that area, and you could very easily, this is something I think I might do with my floating pirate ship actually, just feed a Happy Ghast in that environment so that, give it a snowball and it's going to stick around there so that it feels like a creature that's hovering around the rigging and that kind of thing, like interacting with the space in an interesting way that indicates it's at home there. But I think I'm expecting to use them for detailing the flat faces of tall buildings, if they're the skyscraper builds, or even large landscapes, things like cliffs and mountains where you've got sheer rock faces, or you just don't want to be concerned about the right route to jump up somewhere. I think their vertical travel is really the important factor here. They're pretty slow on a horizontal axis, but I think in terms of vertical transport and precision when it comes to placing details and doing stuff like, thinking back to Empires Season 2 when I built the Great Bridge spanning the lake, if I didn't design much detail for the underside of that bridge that I didn't build in the initial pass, and if I wanted to go back and add some details to the underside of that, it's above a lake, the scaffolding would be enormous, I'd be falling off it constantly. I feel like using a Happy Ghast would be perfect for detailing the underside of like large arches and stuff like that, where you could very easily get up there and tinker with a large area of stuff without having to worry too much about whether you're about to fall off your scaffolding.
Yeah, I think building on the underside of things, ceilings that are too far away, ceilings that are broad, that you have to go down and up scaffolding over and over and over again, and it gets a little bit tedious. I think they're going to come in really, really handy for that kind of thing. To the point where if that's something you want to do, you have to then think about, say you're building the inside of a large chapel. You have to then get the Ghast inside the chapel. Like, you have to have a big enough door,
and
or
out
you have
again,
to grow,
presumably.
Yeah, or you have to grow it inside, and then either kill it or have a way to remove it. Like, so there's some other things to consider in there as well. But something I was thinking about this weekend as I was working on the road textures, I have FreeCam as a mod on my client, so it allows me, just as a content creator, to take screenshots, and I use it quite often in gameplay to back up and look at something. Working on a roof, and I'm standing directly on top of the texture, and it's kind of hard sometimes to see whether you're doing it right, whether you have put two blocks too close together. So I, as an artist, like to back up and look at things, and I do that very quickly with FreeCam. This, for non-modded players, allows the same thing. If you want to get up a little bit higher, look down at the road texture that you're working on, you want to get on a Happy Ghast and back up 10 blocks and look at the roof that you're working on. Is the shape right? Is the texture right? And this allows players to do that, and I think that that's great. I think that's going to allow players to have a different perspective. I know that the team has mentioned that in one of their making of videos for the Happy Ghast. Like, they wanted to get players up high and a way to look down. We've mentioned on the show before, like, you can do it with Elytra now, but you're always traveling at speed. Like, this is the first time that you can, in vanilla Minecraft, get up high and stop. You can hover and just look at stuff. And I think from a building scale, when you get to end game and you start building really large things, having this kind of perspective is going to be super, super helpful. And I can see it being used just as much for a observation platform as I can as a building platform for folks.
Yeah, we've talked in the past about the Elytra glass platform that you had like a fun acronym for it, your like observation platform that you'd like fly off to and take a look back at something.
Yeah.
I've talked about wanting something that you could almost like pin a third person camera to, like having a block that you could like observe something from a distance to get a view of it so you weren't flying away as much. Could the Happy Ghast be a bridge between those two ideas? Could it be like something that, yeah, you genuinely use as a more mobile viewing platform? I think that's a fun concept, especially since, yeah, unlike Elytra, you can just hover there. So instead of having to fly by and take a screenshot at the right moment, you can just, head off to a distance and admire it from there. It certainly saves a lot of like scaffolding up from the right distance, then realizing you're not quite far enough away and having to like reposition everything again.
Yeah, the acronym was BURP. It was the backup and review platform.
That's the one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very, very good. I like that a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, that was something my community came up with because I just do it so often. Like I build them in Satisfactory. I often do it in Minecraft, whether it's a scaffolding thing or even just like choosing a nearby tree and just jumping on your elytra and quickly flying up to this higher tree so you can just sit in there and look down and see what's going on in the build. And yeah, I can see the gas being used for that. I know this was an idea that you had, but if it is a group project, like if you're on a server, or if you've got a teammate, then having someone pilot the ghast while you do the building or the placing could be very interesting as well. And I could see that making things in the end a lot easier. Like if you are building a large bridge or a large farm or something like that over the void, and you've got someone only concerned with piloting and moving the ghast as you're frantically placing blocks for your land bridge or whatever, it takes some of the harrowing experience of building over the void away. You can have that experience of placing a bunch of blocks as you place like basically like a 3 wide bridge if you wanted to, probably at a decent speed if the person behind you is driving the ghast. And are we driving, flying, piloting? What are we? How do we say this? At a decent pace where you can just like place blocks at a speed, it would be like 3D printing a bridge, right? Like you could really get some stuff done from a utility standpoint quite quickly. I don't know about like getting on the ghast, off the ghast, potentially falling through the ghast. They seem to have fixed a couple of bugs like that this week, so I'm not sure how much stuff I would have on me the first time I fly a ghast over the void in the end trying to build something. But if it's steady and consistent, and once you know the mechanics and you don't jump off by accident, I think it could be really, really cool, because I remember the pain in the butt of having to light like the underside cliffs of the end island to try to reduce enderman spawns and stuff like that. And to be able to fly around underneath that with a happy ghast and just do the things that you need would be super cool.
That's the other thing I expect that we haven't covered yet that players are going to use them for, is the ability to not take them to the end necessarily because their hitbox is too big, but grow one in the end, like, revive a dried ghast in the end, and after just a small amount of time, being able to use that as a form of transport to get hold of Elytra and to raid end cities. Obviously, you've got to be concerned about Shulker at that point, but I think the ability to take those exploring, and if you're okay with the speed at which they travel, you at least have some protection from the void. And it also means you don't run out of hunger because you're not the one who's in charge of your locomotion. It's the same as like driving a boat around. If you're sailing from one place to another, even with the amount of rowing you're doing, your hunger doesn't deplete. So I think it's a really great way of saving on resources when you head out to the end for the first time, and probably saves a lot of people bridging materials and making a mess of the end islands if they have plans for them later.
Granted, they're pretty slow. I wonder if they'd be useful in a dragon fight, because one of the things that we've added to our end area is 2 giant end stone towers, and it allows you to quickly get up to the top of the tower to shoot the crystals that are recharging the dragon, and also give you an advantage of shooting the dragon from a pretty high vantage point, provided that's you're not using Elytra. Some of our server members don't either don't have Elytra or don't want to use Elytra in the end because they don't want to lose the only pair that they have in the dragon fight. And so I wonder if getting on a happy ghast with another player, someone to fly it, someone to shoot, I wonder how that would affect the Ender Dragon fight.
I think it'd be pretty dicey if the Ender Dragon flies directly at you. I don't know if the Happy Ghast has the speed to get out of the way in time, but it could be a really fun challenge. Imagining a server full of people all bringing Happy Ghasts and, growing them all in the end. And as some folks in our live chat are saying, there's always the possibility of like moving them around with minecarts, or some people do like very technical things with the end portal to get unexpected stuff in there. So we could still find stuff like that happening for sure. Even bringing a Ghastling through could maybe save a little bit of time, and you've just got to spam snowballs on it as soon as it's into the end and wait for it to grow up. Lots of opportunities to be explored with the Happy Ghast, and maybe we'll be exploring them as early as next week. The update probably won't arrive in time for next week's show, but hopefully we'll have our hands on the next update very, very soon. In the meantime, that's going to wrap it up for this episode of The Spawn Chunks. Thank you so much for listening. You can find more information about the show and links to some of the stuff that we've talked about today over at thespawnchunks.com. The music for the show is composed by me, and The Spawn Chunks is proud as ever to be a listener-supported podcast. If you're getting some value out of the show, consider putting some value back in. You can do that over at patreon.com/thespawnchunks. Joining at any of the paid tiers gets you access to our patrons-only Discord chat. You can listen to the show live when we record it in Discord every Monday. We also have monthly hangouts, and we got a quarterly hangout coming up where we do a behind-the-scenes look at all the facts and figures of the podcast, all the numbers that's been doing across various platforms. So if that's of interest to you, once again, patreon.com/thespawnchunks is the place to go. You can join our ranks of currently 280 patrons. We would love to increase that number as June continues and as more people get into Minecraft again over the summer holidays. Special thanks go out to our content engineers, Hunter555, Jumbo Sale, Mindtrip Media, and That Penguin Dude. We've had a couple of people depart the content engineer tier, but as always, we thank them all for their support.
Sharing the podcast with your friends is the easiest way to support the show. Just tell a friend about the Spawn Chunks and where they can go to listen to it. You can find us at the Spawn Chunks on social media. You can listen to the show every Monday on your favorite podcasting app, as well as video versions on Spotify and on YouTube. The RSS feed is linked on thespawnchunks.com, and the patron-only RSS feed is on the Patreon page. That's where you can listen to the render distance, the extended version of the program. And I will tell you now that there are not as many emails in the inbox as usual. So if you would like to send a message to spawnchunkmail@gmail.com, there's a higher chance that we're going to read it on the show.
My name is Jonny, but online I go by PixelRiffs. You can find most of what I do at youtube.com/PixelRiffs, where the Minecraft Survival Guide is currently on hiatus while I look into the Craft Mine update, but expect it to make a reappearance once the Happy Ghast arrives. I also stream 3 days a week on Twitch, where lately in Minecraft Misadventures, I have been grinding for the Skeletal Wolf mount, but once again, activity there is going to pick up as I get bored and decide to do other things. I also play a couple of other games from time to time. We are close to wrapping up the plot of Claire Obscure Expedition 33, but I think there's a lot of side content in that game, so we'll see how long it takes me. In the meantime, I'm also the voice of the unofficial Hermitcraft recap, which you can find through a quick YouTube search. And aside from that, I'm at PixelRiffs on Blue Sky and Instagram. Joel, where can people find you online?
Right now, I can point you towards the Citadel Cafe, which is my podcast about sci-fi and fantasy entertainment. The latest episode has been recorded. I'm currently in the process of editing it. Steven ESC and I talked about Thunderbolts, which we went to go see in theater last weekend. And we also talked about a new Lego set that he's really excited about. You can also find me on social media. Joel Duggan, very easy to find. Joel Duggan on Twitch as well. And I am streaming Tuesdays through Saturdays right now at 1 o'clock Atlantic. That's UTC minus 4 hours for people around the world. Covering Minecraft lately with the focus on finishing West Hill, but also playing Modulus and returning to Satisfactory, because Satisfactory has got a new release coming up on June 10th, so you can expect that this month as well.
Thanks for visiting the Spawn Chunks. The world outside is infinite, so keep chasing those skies.